My fiancée declared, if you actually loved me, you'd pay off my parents' mortgage. Real men take care of their woman's family. Stop being so selfish with your money. She added, this is a test of your commitment to me. I just nodded, then canceled the wedding. 72 hours later, her entire panicked family showed up at my office demanding answers. Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Throwaway account because this story is absolutely nuclear, and I'm still dealing with some of the legal fallout. Also, this is going to be extremely long, so maybe grab some coffee or whatever. I've been lurking on this sub for months, working up the courage to finally tell this story, but seeing some of the other revenge posts here made me realize mine belongs here too. Quick note, all names, locations, and some identifying details have been changed because I'm not trying to get doxxed. But every single thing that happened is 100% true, and I have documentation to prove all of it. My fiancé said if you loved me, you'd pay for my parents' mortgage. I just nodded. Then I canceled the wedding. 6 months later, her entire family had lost everything and was living in a tiny apartment working minimum wage jobs. But holy shit, I'm getting way ahead of myself here. Let me start from the beginning, because the context makes this story so much more satisfying. Alright, so I'm Tyler, 28 years old, and I work as a regional sales manager for a mid-sized medical equipment company here in Indiana. Before you ask, no, it's not glamorous at all. I sell things like hospital beds, wheelchairs, and those machines that go beep to clinics and medical facilities across 3 states. But here's the thing, I'm really freaking good at it. I clear about $77,000 a year plus quarterly bonuses that can push me over $85,000 in good years. Now here's where my story gets important. I grew up dirt poor. Like, eating ramen for dinner 4 nights a week? Poor. My dad walked out when I was 11, leaving my mom to raise 3 kids on a waitress salary. We got evicted twice before I turned 16. I wore the same pair of jeans to school for 2 years straight because we couldn't afford new clothes. I swore on everything I held sacred that I would never, ever be broke again. So from the moment I got my first real job at 22, I've been obsessive about saving money. Emergency fund, retirement account, the whole 9 yards. By 28, I had about $43,000 in savings and owned a small house that I'd bought with an FHA loan 2 years prior. That background is crucial for understanding how thoroughly I got played. I met Jessica at a friend's barbecue about 2 years ago. She was 26, absolutely gorgeous, and working part-time at this boutique clothing store that charged $80 for basic t-shirts. I'm talking model-level beautiful here. Long blonde hair, perfect smile, the kind of woman who gets free drinks just for existing. And for some reason, she was interested in me, a regular-looking guy who sells medical equipment and drives a 5-year-old Toyota Camry. Should have been red flag number 1, but I was thinking with the wrong head. Jessica came from what she described as a successful family. Her dad, Gary, owned 2 Subway franchises in nice parts of town. Her mom, Diana, ran a small catering business that did events for the local country club crowd. They lived in this beautiful house in Maple Heights. You know, one of those subdivisions where all the houses look the same, but cost $300,000. Her younger sister, Brittany, was 23, still living at home, and working part-time at a tanning salon when she felt like showing up. But according to the family, Brittany was finding herself and exploring her options. The family dynamic was weird. Everything revolved around making sure Jessica was happy. They constantly talked about her high school modeling photos. She'd done exactly 1 local car dealership commercial, her business degree, associate's degree from community college, and how she deserved the best of everything in life. During family dinners, Gary would go on and on about how Jessica was too good for this town and how she needed someone who could appreciate her worth. Diana would nod along and make comments about how Jessica's friends were all dating men who knew how to treat a lady right. I thought they were just proud parents. Turns out they were interviewing me for the position of family ATM. The financial stuff started small and felt normal at first. Jessica would suggest we go to nice restaurants, then get quiet when the check came, until I automatically reached for my wallet. She'd mention wanting something, a new purse, shoes, whatever, and then get this sad look when I didn't immediately offer to buy it for her. I just thought, since you're doing so well financially, she'd say with this little pout that made me feel like a complete asshole. So I'd buy the purse, or the shoes, or the $120 perfume she'd fallen in love with at Macy's. After about 6 months of dating, the request got more direct. Her car needed new tires, $650. Could I help out just this once? Her mom's catering van broke down and they needed it fixed to save the business. $1,800. It was an emergency, and they'd pay me back as soon as insurance came through. Spoiler alert, insurance never came through. Every time I hesitated, Jessica had a response ready. I thought we were building something together, she'd say. Or, my family has always been generous with people they care about. The guilt trips were surgical in their precision, but the real masterpiece was when she'd compare me to other guys. Madison's boyfriend Tyler bought her a $2,000 necklace just because it was Tuesday, she mentioned once while we were walking through the mall. He said he wanted her to know how much she meant to him. Guess what I bought her the next week? After we got engaged. Yeah, I proposed after 14 months because I genuinely thought she was the one. The financial demands became a flood. Christmas shopping for her family because you're practically a son to them now cost me $1,400. Her dad's restaurant equipment unexpectedly broke down, and he needed a quick loan of $2,800 to avoid losing business. Every single time it was positioned as a one-time emergency. Every single time Jessica would be so grateful and loving afterward that I felt like the best boyfriend in the world. And every single time, the money disappeared forever. But I didn't see the pattern yet. I was too busy being grateful that someone like her loved someone like me. The wake-up call came 3 months before our scheduled wedding date, during what was supposed to be a romantic dinner at Vincenzo's, this fancy Italian place Jessica loved. So, Jessica said, twirling pasta around her fork but not actually eating any of it, Mom and Dad got some really bad news today. I was halfway through my chicken marsala when she said it, and something in her tone made me put down my fork. By this point in our relationship, I'd learned that bad news involving her parents usually ended with me writing a check. What kind of bad news? The bank called them this morning. She looked up at me with these big, concerned eyes. They're behind on the house payments and some other things. Like, really behind. They might lose everything. I felt my stomach drop. Gary and Diana losing their house would be genuinely terrible. And despite everything, I'd grown to care about them. How behind are they? It's not even that much, really. The banker said if they could come up with $47,000, it would get them completely current and give them some breathing room to get back on their feet. $47,000. That was more than I made in a year after taxes. That was almost my entire life savings. The emergency fund I'd been building since I was 22. The down payment for our future house. Everything I'd worked for. Jessica, that's basically everything I have saved. Her expression shifted slightly, and for just a second I saw something cold flicker across her face before the concerned, loving look returned. I know it's a lot, baby, but think about it. We're getting married in 3 months anyway. What's yours is going to be mine, and what's mine is going to be yours, right? She reached across the table and took my hand. Tyler, you're so smart with money and planning and everything. If you really loved me, you'd just take care of this. Think of it as an early wedding gift to me and my family. The way she said it made my blood run cold. Not, could you help? Not, is there any way? But, if you really loved me. It wasn't a request. It was a test. And there was only one acceptable answer. My parents practically raised me by themselves, she continued, her grip on my hand getting tighter. They sacrificed everything to give me and Brittany the best life possible. They deserve to enjoy their golden years without worrying about money. This is what real men do for their families. I sat there staring at her, and it was like someone had suddenly turned on all the lights in a dark room. Every expensive dinner, where I'd automatically paid. Every emergency that required my immediate financial intervention. Every guilt trip about how her family had always been generous with people they cared about. I wasn't her fiancé. I was her retirement plan. Her family's retirement plan. So, she said, squeezing my hand and smiling expectantly, can we go to the bank tomorrow and get this taken care of? I looked at Jessica, really looked at her, and suddenly saw a complete stranger. This beautiful woman I'd been planning to marry, planning to build a life with, was sitting across from me asking me to liquidate my entire future to bail out her parents' poor financial decisions. And she was asking like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. I pulled my hand back slowly and gave her the most deliberate nod of my life. I understand, I said quietly. The relief that washed over her face was immediate and nauseating. She actually clapped her hands together like a little kid who'd just been told she was getting a pony for Christmas. Oh my God, thank you, baby. I knew you'd come through for us. You're literally saving our family. She was beaming now, already pulling out her phone. I'm going to call mom and dad right now and tell them the good news. No, I said, standing up and putting my napkin on the table. Don't call them yet. Let me let me figure out the logistics first. Of course. You're so thoughtful, always thinking everything through. She stood up too and hugged me tight. This is why I love you so much. This is why I knew you were the one. The drive back to her parents' house was silent except for Jessica chattering excitedly about how relieved her parents were going to be, how this would give them a fresh start, and how we should probably postpone our honeymoon for a year or two to give me time to rebuild the wedding fund. How thoughtful of her to plan my financial future. I dropped her off with a kiss and watched her practically skip up the walkway to the front door. She was probably inside telling her family the good news before I'd even backed out of the driveway. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing. $47,000. My entire safety net. Gone. And for what? To bail out people who'd probably just end up in the same situation again in 2 years? By the time I pulled into my driveway, I'd made my decision. Jessica wanted to find out what kind of man I really was. She was about to get a freaking masterclass. I didn't sleep at all that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, a legal pad, and about 2 years' worth of financial records spread out like I was planning the D-Day invasion. What I found made me physically sick to my stomach. I'd been tracking my expenses pretty carefully since college. Poor kid habits die hard. So I had records of everything. Every dinner, every gift, every emergency loan that never got repaid. I made a spreadsheet and started itemizing every single expense related to Jessica and her family. The big-ticket items were bad enough. $2,800 loan to Gary for restaurant equipment. $1,800 for Diana's catering van repairs. $1,650 for Jessica's emergency car repairs. $1,400 for Christmas gifts for her family. $2,100 for her engagement party that her family insisted on. $850 for that necklace after she saw Madison's. But it was the death by 1,000 cuts that really got me. Every fancy dinner where I automatically paid the $150 bill. The $200 spa day I'd bought her just because. The designer purse she'd wanted for her birthday. The weekend trips where I covered the hotel and meals for both of us. 22 months of dating. $19,347 in total expenses that were above and beyond normal relationship costs. $19,347. That number just sat there on my screen, mocking me. Almost 20 grand in less than 2 years. And now they wanted another 47,000 on top of it. But here's where it gets interesting. See, one of the benefits of working in medical sales is that you develop contacts everywhere. Hospitals, clinics, banks, you name it. So I decided to do a little research into the emergency that required my life savings. I called my buddy Steve, who works as a loan officer at First National, the bank that holds Gary and Diana's mortgage. We'd done some business together over the years, and after a few casual questions during our monthly networking coffee, I learned some very interesting facts. Gary and Diana were behind on their mortgage payments, but only by a few months. What they were really drowning in was everything else. The payments on Diana's brand new BMW, the loan on Gary's boat, the second mortgage they'd taken out to renovate their kitchen, the credit lines they'd used to buy new equipment for the catering business, business loans that were already in default. The emergency wasn't just the house. They were facing a complete financial collapse because they'd overextended themselves on luxury purchases and now wanted me to bail them out so they could keep their lifestyle without making any sacrifices. They'd manipulated the truth to Jessica, or Jessica was in on it. Either way, I was being played for the biggest sucker in Indiana. That's when I stopped feeling guilty and started feeling dangerous. I opened a new spreadsheet and titled it Project Nuclear Option Complete Financial Audit. I was going to document every single manipulation, every guilt trip that ended with me opening my wallet, every time they'd treated me like their personal bank account. And then I was going to burn their whole world down. But first, I had some phone calls to make. Canceling a wedding 3 months out is expensive as hell, but it's a lot cheaper than $47,000 plus a lifetime of financial servitude. I started calling vendors Wednesday morning. The venue, the caterer, the photographer, the DJ, the florist. One by one, I canceled everything Jessica and I had booked together. I'm so sorry to do this, I told Rita from Hillcrest Manor, our wedding venue. But the engagement is off. Oh, honey, I'm sorry to hear that, she said. And she genuinely sounded sympathetic. Was it something sudden? You could say that. My fiancé just informed me that if I really loved her, I'd pay off her parents $47,000 in debt as a wedding present. There was a long pause. Jesus Christ, sweetie. Run. Just run. I've been in this business for 15 years, and I've seen this exact scenario play out before. It never gets better, only worse. The caterer was less sympathetic but professional about it. I lost my $800 deposit there. The photographer was a complete bitch and kept her entire $1,800 down payment, claiming it was clearly stated in the contract. The DJ was actually cool about it and only charged me a $200 cancellation fee instead of keeping the full $600 deposit. All told, I was out about $4,300 in lost deposits and cancellation fees. Expensive, but a bargain compared to the alternative. By Wednesday evening, our wedding existed only as a series of line items on my credit card statement. I felt this weird mix of grief and relief, sad that the relationship was over, but free from the constant financial pressure I'd been living under. Now came the hard part. Telling Jessica. I spent an hour crafting the perfect text message. It needed to be clear, final, and leave no room for negotiation. Jessica, the wedding is canceled. I will not be paying your parents' debt. This is not the partnership I want for my life. I'll arrange to have the engagement ring returned. Please don't contact me again. I read it 20 times, took a deep breath, and hit send. Then, I immediately blocked her number, blocked her on all social media, blocked her parents, and blocked Brittany for good measure. I made myself a sandwich, sat on my couch, and waited for the nuclear fallout to begin. I didn't have to wait long. The harassment started that night. My phone started ringing from numbers I didn't recognize. Probably Jessica using her friends' phones to try to get through to me. When I didn't answer, the voicemail started. First was Brittany. Tyler, what the freak is wrong with you? Jessica is completely heartbroken. You can't just abandon people who love you because of money. Then Diana. Tyler, honey, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Jessica says you think we lied about something? We need to talk this through like adults. Finally, Gary. Tyler, I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing, but you're making a huge mistake. Call me back immediately. I deleted all of them without listening to the full messages. Thursday was more of the same, but with added creativity. Someone signed me up for every spam mailing list they could find. I started getting calls about extended car warranties, solar panels, and timeshare opportunities. Pizza deliveries I didn't order started showing up at my house, but Friday morning was when they really escalated. I was walking into our office building around 8:30 a.m. when Miranda from reception practically tackled me in the lobby. Tyler, thank God you're here. There's a situation. Some people are here demanding to see you and they're making a scene. I could hear Gary's voice booming through the entire first floor of our building from 3 hallways away. Something about cowardice and abandoning family in their time of need. My boss, Carol, intercepted me before I could get anywhere near the lobby. She's this tiny woman in her 50s who radiates authority like a nuclear reactor radiates heat. Your personal drama is currently being broadcast to my entire staff, she said in her deadly calm voice. Whatever this is about, you need to handle it immediately. I can explain. Handle it first. Explain it later. The scene in the main lobby was pure theater. Jessica was sitting in one of the chairs, crying these huge, dramatic tears while clutching tissues. Diana was standing behind her doing this hand-wringing performance, while telling anyone who would listen about what a heartless monster I was. Gary was pacing back and forth, his face red as a tomato, occasionally pointing toward the elevator and demanding that someone get that coward down here. And Brittany, freaking Brittany, was recording everything on her phone like she was gathering evidence for some kind of legal case. They'd cornered poor Miranda at the reception desk and were forcing her to listen to their sob story about how I'd cruelly abandoned Jessica in her darkest hour of need. Tyler! Gary spotted me first, and his voice carried across the entire lobby like he was announcing a boxing match. There you are! You don't end an engagement over a goddamn text message. You're going to march your ass down to First National right now and fix this situation. Every employee in the building stopped what they were doing. People were coming out of offices, gathering around the edges of the lobby, pretending to check their phones while obviously listening to every single word. This was supposed to be a public humiliation campaign. They figured if they made enough of a scene at my workplace, I'd cave just to make it stop. This is my workplace, Gary. We're not doing this here. We'll do this wherever we damn well please. Diana's voice pitched higher, making sure everyone could hear her. You humiliated our daughter. You broke her heart and destroyed our family because you're too selfish to help people who love you. Jessica looked up from her crying, just long enough to deliver her line, How could you do this to us, Tyler? We trusted you. We opened our hearts to you. The performance was actually impressive. I had to admire the coordination and commitment to the dramatic narrative they'd constructed. My decision is final, I said, looking directly at Jessica. This is over. That's when Carol appeared next to me like an avenging angel in a business suit. Is there a problem here? She asked in a voice that could freeze liquid nitrogen. Gary made the critical error of trying to intimidate her. This is a private family matter, lady. Mind your own business. Big mistake. Huge. It became my business the moment you started disrupting my workplace and harassing my employees, Carol replied, her voice getting quieter and more dangerous. You have exactly 30 seconds to remove yourselves from this building voluntarily, or I'm calling security to have you escorted out for trespassing. And if you ever set foot in here again, I'll have you arrested. The transformation on Gary's face was beautiful to watch. He was clearly used to bullying people into submission, but Carol had been managing construction projects and dealing with angry contractors for 20 years. A middle-aged guy throwing a tantrum over his daughter's love life was barely a warm-up exercise. You can't, he started. 20 seconds, Carol said, already pulling out her phone. They left. All four of them, muttering threats and promises that this isn't over. But not before Jessica looked me dead in the eyes and said, "You're going to regret this for the rest of your life." As soon as they were out the door, Carol turned to me. My office. Now. I spent the next 30 minutes explaining the whole situation to Carol. The money demands, the manipulation, the final $47,000 ultimatum. By the end of it, she was shaking her head. Jesus, Tyler! You dodged a bullet the size of a freight train. She leaned back in her chair. But this shit better not happen again. I like you, but I won't have my workplace turned into a circus. It won't happen again, I promised. Good. Now get back to work. And maybe consider changing your phone number. I knew the office scene was just the opening act. This family had shown me they were willing to escalate, and I was about to find out exactly how far they'd go. What followed was 2 months of psychological warfare that would have impressed military strategists. The social media campaign launched that weekend. Brittany spearheaded a coordinated assault across Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, painting me as a manipulative monster who'd financially and emotionally abused her poor, innocent sister. The posts were masterfully crafted for maximum damage. Some people will use love as a weapon to control and manipulate others. So proud of my sister for finding the strength to escape. Narcissistic abuse, financial abuse, gaslighting. Each post included carefully chosen photos. Jessica looking beautiful and sad, family photos from happier times, screenshots of inspirational quotes about surviving abuse. Nothing specific enough to be legally actionable, but definitely designed to destroy my reputation with anyone who knew us. The really insidious part was how they mixed in just enough truth to make it believable. Yes, I had ended our engagement suddenly. Yes, it was over money. But they conveniently left out the part where they demanded I liquidate my life savings to bail them out of their financial irresponsibility. Then came the escalated harassment. Pizza deliveries at all hours, sometimes 3 or 4 a night. Subscriptions to magazines I'd never heard of. Someone signed me up for information packets from every MLM company in existence. The Jehovah's Witnesses started showing up at my door every Saturday morning. I'm pretty sure someone told them I was seeking spiritual guidance, because they were remarkably persistent. But the most damaging was when they started targeting my professional reputation. Fake reviews started appearing for our company, claiming I'd provided terrible service, overcharged for equipment, and was unprofessional and unreliable. Someone called our main office pretending to be from a medical licensing board, claiming there were ethics violations they needed to investigate regarding me. Another call came from someone claiming to be from the Better Business Bureau with fraud allegations. Carol was getting pissed. This shit needs to stop, Tyler. I've had to deal with 3 fake complaint calls this week. It's affecting our business. But here's what Jessica and her family didn't understand about me. I'm not just organized, I'm methodical. And I'd been documenting everything. Every fake review, screenshots with timestamps, every harassment call, recorded when legal, every piece of spam mail, photographed and saved, every social media post, archived. I was building a case that would make a prosecutor weep with joy. Meanwhile, I decided to do some research of my own. Public records are amazing things when you know where to look and what questions to ask. A little digging revealed that Gary and Diana's financial situation was way worse than I'd originally thought. They weren't just behind on a few payments, they were leveraged to the absolute limit on everything. The house had not just a second mortgage, but a third one disguised as a home equity line of credit. Both of Diana's business vehicles were financed at predatory interest rates. Gary's franchise fees were 6 months in arrears, and corporate was already initiating termination procedures. They weren't successful business owners living slightly above their means. They were a house of cards built on credit and held together by sheer audacity. And I was about to become a very strong wind. The first domino fell when I sued Jessica for the engagement ring. In Indiana, an engagement ring is considered a conditional gift, meaning it's given with the expectation that marriage will follow. When the engagement ends, regardless of who ends it, the ring legally has to be returned to whoever purchased it. The ring had cost me $8,900. Not huge money, but not pocket change either. Jessica hired a lawyer with money she probably didn't have. Their argument was that I'd given the ring as an unconditional expression of love, and that I'd breached our relationship contract by refusing to support her family in their time of need. My lawyer, Dave, was ready for that bullshit. He introduced my meticulously documented spreadsheet showing nearly $20,000 in financial manipulation over the course of our relationship, not as a bill I was trying to collect, but as evidence that the engagement had been obtained under false pretenses. Your Honor, Dave said during our hearing, the defendant and her family systematically extracted money from my client over the course of their relationship, culminating in a demand that he liquidate his entire life savings to pay their personal debts. When he refused, they launched a coordinated harassment campaign designed to destroy his reputation and livelihood. The engagement was clearly based on financial extraction rather than genuine affection. He presented printouts of the social media posts, evidence of the harassment campaign, and witness statements from my coworkers about the office incident. The judge wasn't impressed with their side. Jessica's lawyer tried to paint me as a controlling manipulator, but when pressed for specific examples, the best they could come up with was that I'd kept detailed financial records and made unilateral decisions about the wedding. Yeah, the unilateral decision to not bankrupt myself for people who saw me as a piggy bank. The judge ruled in my favor. Jessica was ordered to return the ring or pay its appraised value, $8,900, within 30 days. She didn't have $8,900. So Dave obtained a judgment against her and began garnishment proceedings against her part-time income. But here's where things got really interesting. About 3 months after I won the ring case, Gary and Diana's financial house of cards started collapsing on its own. It turned out they'd been in much worse shape than even I'd realized. The Subway corporate office had been investigating Gary's franchises for months due to unpaid fees and violations of franchise agreements. When they finally terminated his franchise rights, he was forced to close both locations immediately. Diana's catering business had been operating on borrowed time, too. She'd been using business credit cards to cover personal expenses and had fallen behind on commercial rent. When her landlord evicted the catering company, she lost all her commercial equipment to cover unpaid debts. Without income from either business, Gary and Diana couldn't keep up with any of their payments. The house payments, the car payments, the credit cards, the business loans, everything went into default simultaneously. The foreclosure process took about 7 months from start to finish. During that time, I watched from a distance as their entire lifestyle unraveled. Gary ended up having to take a job as an assistant manager at someone else's Subway for $12 an hour. Diana got hired as a server at Applebee's. They moved into a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in the worst part of town. Jessica, who'd never held a full-time job in her adult life, discovered that living without mommy and daddy's financial support was harder than she'd imagined. She bounced between a few different jobs, call center work, retail, food service, never lasting more than a few months anywhere. Brittany had to get a real job too. Turns out the part-time tanning salon gig wasn't enough to cover her car payments when her parents stopped subsidizing her lifestyle. The begging started about 8 months after I'd ended the engagement. Gary called me first. His voice was completely different from the angry, demanding tone he'd used in my office lobby. Now he sounded broken, desperate. Tyler, please. I know how this looks, but we're drowning here. Maybe we can work something out? Maybe you and Jessica can try again? Gary, if Jessica really loved me, she never would have asked me to bankrupt myself for your debt. We both know this was never about love. I hung up on him. Diana tried next, showing up at my office building during lunch hour. Security wouldn't let her up, but she waited by my car in the parking garage. Tyler, please, she said, tears streaming down her face. I made a mistake. We all made mistakes. But we're losing everything. Diana, you're not losing everything because of me. You're losing everything because you spent money you didn't have and made financial decisions you couldn't afford. But if you and Jessica could work things out. Diana, your daughter looked me in the eye and told me that if I really loved her, I'd liquidate my life savings to pay your debts. That's not love. That's financial manipulation. She stood there crying in the parking garage as I drove away. I felt bad for about 30 seconds, then remembered the coordinated office ambush and the months of harassment. But my favorite interaction was when Jessica herself finally called. She'd gotten a new number and a new approach. "Tyler, please," she said, her voice shaking with what sounded like genuine panic. "I'm sorry, okay? I made a mistake. I didn't understand how bad things were going to get. Can't we try again? I know we can make this work if we both try." The desperation in her voice was almost satisfying. Almost. "Jessica, let me ask you something. Do you remember what you told me at Vincenzo's that night?" I. What do you mean? "You said that if I really loved you, I'd pay your parents' debt. Do you remember saying that?" "Yes, but, well, if you really love your parents, you'll get a full-time job and start helping them pay their debts yourself. But we both know you're not going to do that, are you?" There was a long pause. "Tyler, please. You're destroying my family over money." "No, Jessica. I'm refusing to be destroyed by your family for money. There's a big difference. I'll do anything. Please, we can start over. Anything except get a real job and take responsibility for your own family's finances, right?" I hung up and blocked that number too. Last I heard from a mutual friend, Jessica was still bouncing between jobs and living in a studio apartment. Gary was still working at Subway and had started driving for DoorDash on weekends to make ends meet. Diana was working double shifts at Applebee's and had developed serious health problems from the stress. Brittany had actually turned her life around the most. She'd gotten a full-time job at a medical office and was taking night classes to become a dental hygienist. Apparently, being forced to support herself had given her some much-needed perspective on reality. I don't feel guilty about what happened to them. They made their choices based on greed and entitlement, and I made mine based on self-preservation and basic financial sanity. The only difference is that my choices were grounded in reality, while theirs were based on the fantasy that someone else would always be there to fund their lifestyle. Sometimes the best revenge isn't hurting someone. It's just refusing to save them from the consequences of their own actions. And sometimes the trash takes itself out.